Well folks, Alien Earth is here, and hopefully by now you've all had a chance to see the first 2 episodes. Just a warning, spoilers ahead. We've been waiting patiently, and for the most part I've been hyping up this show as I believed it was going to hit all the right notes. Now I should explain that perhaps you saw the thumbnail and title and assumed this was all going to be bad news. Far from it. There's a lot I loved about the show and some elements of the first 2 hours that will clearly develop and improve over time. Therefore, in the effort to allow the full series or season a fair shot, I'll leave my emotions out of this early review of the first 2 episodes and try to simply discuss the show's merits and pitfalls as I see them. But I gotta say right off the bat, there are a couple of moments that pulled me out, and other parts that may just be a case of becoming used to another filmmaker's style and his vision of Alien. The show starts off great. The intro in the first 15 minutes are foreboding as hell, as it opens with a multitude of subtle audio vibes from at least 3 different Alien films that I could detect. There's even a sort of military fanfare tune that plays throughout the episodes, which is reminiscent of Aliens. The characters on the Maginot are vibrant yet grounded, and just their interactions make you believe that they've been out there a very long time, and the friction among some of the crew feels quite tangible. I enjoyed the subtle airflow sounds within the corridors, perfectly copied and pasted from the Nostromo, and the aesthetics and mood were spot on. Here we go, I thought to myself, this is Alien, is it not? I mean, the setup feels tight and flows very well, even if I spent most of the first few minutes wondering if this perfect vibe was going to shift into something else very soon. The dialogue and crew interactions felt very natural. If the mess hall scene in Alien was a 10 out of 10, I'd honestly give this a generous 8. Even the creepy guy was entertaining, but in his defense, there's no harm in just looking, right? Overall, it began to feel like a story was taking shape, familiar yet a fresh take. Dotted at intervals throughout these early scenes are numerous sinister undertones which are precisely reflected in the edgy musical score. Again, very much like the original films, it's a great way to build slow suspense towards the inevitable. I was impressed by the fuzziness of the lens and the film grain used to add depth to the show's style, emphasizing the classic Alien retro appeal. As we transition to Earth, we meet the crucial staff of Prodigy, who are focused on the Lost Boys project, an experimental program that involves transferring sick children into an artificial brain and body. Here we learn a little more about what the numerous trailers have already revealed regarding this latest breakthrough for humanity. But there are hints in episode 2 that this venture might backfire for Prodigy, as demonstrated by Wendy's growing abilities. I'm just praying she doesn't become a god, if you understand my meaning. Its CEO, Boy Cavalier, is humanity's youngest trillionaire, and his actions and demeanour do very little to actually represent this fact. Still, I think he could make a great and complicated villain as the show continues, especially considering that despite his displays of arrogance and indifference, he has no real interest in money, perhaps he never did. We learn he seeks to engage with a mind greater than his own, and his self-driven experiments with these children may offer him this outcome given their limitless potential. But if, like me, you're still waiting for any evidence that this young man is as smart as he describes himself, you certainly won't find any confirmation of this in the first 2 hours. The tone here is vastly different from the Maginot, and I suspect the shift will be something we become used to, as the show will constantly need to juggle multiple themes. So far, the narrative introduces many rich human interactions and character developments that run parallel to the sharp contrast of minor horror beats placed here and there. It achieves this well enough, creating an impactful yet alluring mix of Alien and Earth. I expected there to be dramatic scenes like this that you would never associate with Alien if you watched it out of context, but it is a TV show after all, and all series need to spend time developing the main characters. But I didn't anticipate the Marvel leap and cheesy landing. What does she have, gravity stabilizers in her legs? This was my first warning sign that maybe we weren't in Kansas anymore, and the show might not always take things as seriously as I had hoped. It pulled me out of the experience somewhat, but I remained willing to see where it leads. The main cast is good. Kirsch, played by Timothy Oliphant, has some small quirks and endearing qualities that may even hint at underlying comedic value down the line. His brief monologues and calming yet strict demeanour towards the children lend weight to his character. I loved his consistent cold stare, and he kept me guessing about his intentions as well as his level of consciousness and ability to think freely. He's going to be an important person later on, I can definitely sense that. I thought that Sydney Chandler portrays the fragility of a child very well as Wendy. Her mannerisms and energy, unlike those of most of the other child synthetics, were interesting to watch, but sadly a few of the group's immature antics did start to become a bit of a burden by episode 2, as some of their juvenile behaviours began to grate on me. It's ironic really, many people despised Alien Romulus for being another movie with teenagers rather than adults, yet here we have adults playing children. It's like the modern curse of this franchise, if you're affected by it, that is. In any case, they are children and their performances were spot on in that regard, so maybe they'll win me over as I watch more. I have to say, Moro, played by Babu Cisse, is a real standout for me. He's got the acting chops and his mysterious demeanour really appeals to something I was hoping to get out of the show, as I'm really anxious to learn how deep his connection to Weyland-Yutani will go and what his purpose is. He is the only survivor from the crashed Weyland vessel, a ship that has been out in space for 65 years, collecting all of these nasty little bastards, including a hefty amount of xenomorph eggs. Which means they must have discovered the derelict on LV-426 long before the crew of the Nostromo did, as the Maginot returns to Earth in 2120, 2 years prior to the events of Alien, if we believe the date shown here. Maybe that's why we see an exposed cover on the floor of the pilot's chamber next to the space jockey, and the very reason why Ash replaced the existing science officer on board the Nostromo in the first place. Just a theory. Moro is a cyborg, and I think his bionic arm is one of the coolest aspects to appear in the series so far. How many gadgets does he have in that thing? He's like a utility version of Wolverine. But who he is part of the backbone of the show's main theme. A war or race against time in which humanity's next step in evolution is at stake. The rivals are humans, synthetics, cyborgs, and hybrids. Leading the charge are 5 major corporations, with Prodigy and Weyland-Yutani being 2 of them. Both of which, I'm pleased to say, are established quite early on in the form of these 2 compelling individuals. Who else is wondering if this is Jenny Yutani, daughter of Hideo Yutani, the former CEO and president of the corporation? Speaking of another mysterious character, this guy gives me those Breaking Bad vibes. If you've watched it, the show would place these very small scenes at the start of each series, which only made sense once you had finished it. Twice this maintenance person shows up, and each time he seems to be tackling this never-ending issue of what appears to be a burn mark or a build-up of something nasty on the facility's inner walls. This must mean something, and it may be connected to the work being conducted here in some way. I'd love to hear your ideas on this, but I like the idea of slowly finding out further into the series. If we go back to the Maginot during the Mother impact sequence, I was undecided, shall we say, about the appearance of the xenomorph. I believe what they were attempting to recreate was the slow methodical movement of that famous scene in the original Alien, where the creature was closing in on Lambert, if you remember. The problem was that it looked slightly tacky, and I was left wondering if I would come to hate this new appearance for the rest of the show. The creature's power and lethality was completely there in all of its scenes, and you can really feel the weight of the alien, but the cosmetic aspects left much to be desired. The best way I can describe the Xeno design is to imagine the organism as 50-50 biomechanical, right? Here it feels like a slight offset, 40 biological, 60 mechanical, making the creature less organic than previous interpretations. But I am interested in seeing what they do with the brown xenomorph and how that may differ. The cinematography throughout both episodes is worthy of a shout-out, particularly in the way scenes at the Maginot crash were shot. The level of detail in the visuals and sound was very immersive, I'll give it that. Money well spent in that department. I found it slightly humorous when one of the security force members stated that the ship had gone through portions of the gas pipes leading into the building, and therefore they would need to be careful. Still using gas in 2120? Interesting. The same can be said about their combat gear, which looks no different from today's equipment. However, a big part of me has always loved the retro aspect of the Alien film, so I have no qualms about mixing and matching old and new, especially considering how strongly James Cameron was influenced by the Vietnam War when making Aliens. Before I share what I found to be negatives, I will say that I'm intrigued by where the story of Wendy has taken us. A growing theme is building silently in the background, only spoken of in brief moments of speculation. But what Prodigy has created is a dangerous unknown variable for the company, and could become a huge threat humanity has no chance of comprehending in the wrong hands. In the evolutionary war between humans, cyborgs and synthetics, It's the child's consciousness placed inside an artificial environment that may prove to have no limitations that will ultimately haunt the show. The only one we've seen so far, and potentially just the first of Wendy's new abilities, is her seamless interaction with technology, which allows her to rewrite code with her thoughts and interact with networks on a cyberspace level. Granted, we now have people who can do smaller versions of this in reality, using Neuralink technology, but what will Wendy achieve as the episodes unfold? Episode 2 maintains some of the elements I liked from the first, and having seen both episodes, I'm very eager as an Alien fan to continue. However, parts of it I felt started to go downhill in certain areas. This could have been an episode of overwhelming tension as the search crews investigate the ship, similar to what I experienced while playing Alien Isolation, where I never knew what lay around the corner. Instead, whenever a situation started to escalate in severity, we were presented with one of the main characters' deep reflections during a crisis. The blood and gore were plentiful, but every time the xenomorph made an appearance, although the way it blended into the environment was a nice touch and in keeping with its behaviour, something would let the scene down in some fashion. Perhaps it was the absence of special effects and the wetness that prevented us from thinking it was a man in a suit, or the lack of a believable portrayal of the fear one would experience in this situation, especially when we immediately jump right back into another flashback or, as I said, reflection time. How on earth these weirdos didn't hear a ship crash into the building is beyond me, but the mindless killing aspect doesn't agree with me all too well. You must remember that the xenomorph is an intelligent and instinctive organism, whose primary purpose is to propagate its species by capturing or killing other life forms, and using them as hosts for its offspring. It's built into its DNA to do this, whether it exists in solitary or as part of a colony. And this aspect of its existence has always been its most disturbing quality. Therefore, I will never understand the reasoning behind the senseless mass killing left in its wake, for no apparent reason. Moving on, it seemed to me that all the ingredients were there, but were mashed up with a bizarre sequence of events as well as a very randomised soundtrack of assorted genre pieces. I've certainly never heard rock music take us into the credits in anything Alien before. It felt like they were trying to cater to every type of audience. Although there are no obvious signs that this TV show will ever merge with another franchise, the music cues that sometimes play over important scenes with the Lost Boys evoke a strong Blade Runner feel, especially when the show highlights this concept of transhumanization. Often the two episodes seem unsure of what kind of score to settle on, and we find ourselves a little all over the place. It just never felt like the show took itself as seriously as I would have preferred, in all honesty. So there were certainly a few things I outright disliked, but the majority of the 2 hours was comprised of concepts I either enjoyed or haven't made up my mind about yet. For instance, I couldn't decide if I was impressed by new ideas and technology such as the stun gun that turns into a cocoon weaver, seen here used on the Xeno, or turned off by it. Did you guys find it silly or engaging? Seeing it dragged off as if it were nothing in some ways lowered the threat level once again for this perfect organism. I love moments that make me think, and one such scene was when the alien ignored the cyborg Morrow. We never got to see how it would react, if at all, to a fully synthetic just yet, but Morrow more or less informed the security enforcers that the creature can sense and will react to fear. Therefore, what are they implying? We've always known that these creatures can operate on pheromones, as many people have theorized, but to the point that they become blind or uninterested if one can withstand the urge to panic and overcome fear. Interesting how he knew this, and I wonder if the treasure trove of research archived on the Maginot will begin to be unravelled over the course of the show. Information that is absolutely a must for me is how so many eggs suddenly spawned on the floor here, where the ship discovered them, and one last burning question. Is this blue stasis field emitted from the eggs themselves, or was the same blue light seen in the derelict in Alien placed there by the crew of the Maginot, if indeed they visited it long ago? Some food for thought. Episode 2 mostly consisted of Wendy's hunt for her brother, the medic named Hermit, and the remaining non-humans' assessment of the ship and its cargo. Despite a somewhat diluted Alien experience thus far, I believe the plot could pick up from here on out, as Miss Yutani seems very eager to send in her seasoned troops for purposes of retrieval, whilst the Prodigy CEO remains adamant in his finders keepers logic. The clash could be quite spectacular, but I feel this will take place elsewhere as certain specimens begin to escape the confines of the ship, whilst others go into Prodigy's labs for research. In fact, we see a glimpse of this in the Season 1 trailer that just dropped. In any case, we're about to see how capable Wendy is as she goes after her brother, who was snatched away at the end, resulting in quite the cliffhanger. Throughout this episode, she consistently displayed signs of a deeper sensory connection to the xenomorph, or perhaps some form of psychic ability. Pure speculation of course, but she was wincing many times, and we could clearly hear the cries and hissing of the creature. But there is no way she tackles a Xeno to the ground and wins. If they do that, my breakdowns will become a little more heated, I'm telling you. It's challenging to cover everything in one video, and it'll be easier to dissect one episode a week after this. But what else is there? I was nicely disturbed by the cat scene involving T. Ocellus. But I can imagine this might be a deal breaker for some. As any Alien fan knows, humans are expendable, but you never fuck with the cat. This is the unspoken rule. I'm looking forward to episode 3 and to hopefully learn more about these alien species and where they come from. Let's hope it pulls back from any more superhero action scenes and starts to feel a little more alien as it did in the show's introduction. These are simply episodic reviews, and I will no doubt put together some deeper breakdowns or theory videos in good time, have no fear. Looking forward to reading your comments. Take care, dude signing off.